Hey guys, Film Recaps here, and today we're covering a 2016 horror, action and comedy movie called Fear Inc. The movie begins with a blonde lady running away from someone in a public garage. She manages to hide out of sight. Unfortunately for her, her assailant catches onto her. He approaches her with a crude weapon and follows her as she runs frantically all around the garage. The blonde lady falls down and watches as her assailant approaches her. Thankfully, the assailant disappears and she walks up to the roof of the garage. There, she meets a man who gives her a jump scare. The blonde notices he's just a security guard and tells him she was just looking for her car. Upon getting to her car, she notices something strange as her FM radio tunes into her assailant's walkie-talkie. As she tries to make sense of their conversation, she gets taken out from behind. After the movie intros, the next scene showcases Joe Foster in his living room cussing at his TV for causing him to lose a video game. Then, he's seen going on with his chores of the day, most of which included having fun and causing trouble in the neighborhood. He even bathes his skin in the sauna and cools off in his pool. His girlfriend, Lindsay, arrives from work and chastises him for being such a playful dude. Joe makes a joke out of it and tells his babe to calm down. At night, Joe takes Lindsay out for a date in a weird museum-like place as they all play around the entire place. They get a couple of jump scares before they arrive at a forbidden object. Joe takes a picture of an object as his babe reads some information about it. According to an unknown legend, those who photograph the photo would literally be eliminated during the week. Joe keeps the pic anyways and waltzes off with his girlfriend begging him to delete the picture. Up next, the playful champ and his girl get some popcorn as the couple discusses their parents and some dude named James Garner. Afterward, another creepy dude cuts in on their conversation and challenges them to survive some custom scares his company hosts for people who think they are tough. He gives them his card and leaves. Joe and Lindsay leave for home. As they get back home, Joe finds out he forgot something at the museum. Lindsay tells him they'd get it tomorrow as Bill, their friendly neighbor, walks in and makes some comment about some random stuff. The next day, Joe and his girlfriend are visited by Ben and Ashley Davidson, their friends. Ben walks into Joe's house and compliments the life Joe was living. After playing around a little bit, the quad gets down to partying. That night, as usual, Joe supervises the drinking while the others do nothing but gulp down beers and shots. Up next, it's weed time. Joe smokes and gets down to doing some really messed up games and shit all through the night with his friends and girlfriend. Then, they get into Joe's hot tub and talk about horror movies all through. Joe leaves the pool shortly afterward and runs into the house. Shortly afterward, the trio hears something in the woods. Ben walks forward to check things out. Unfortunately for him, he gets the scare of his life as Joe appears from their garden. After settling down, Lindsay complains about her boyfriend taking too much interest in scaring her lately. Ben and Ashley tell her he's just being Joe, and then they discuss the fear challenge thingy Joe and Lindsay were introduced to in the scare house earlier on. The high Joe listens to Ben babble about how feed up the Fear Inc. company was. Then, Ashley and her boyfriend go to bed. Before going to bed, Lindsay takes a bath as Joe checks out the card the creep gave him and Lindsay earlier. He's hesitant to call the number on it at first. However, he gets jived up and dials the number. The man on the other end picks and tells Joe they're sold out. Meanwhile, Ben and Ashley caress one another in their room as Ben complains over a broken wine glass. He carries his wife to their bedroom and they lock lips. Before things get to the next level, Joe butts in, startling the hormone-driven couple. After apologizing to the duo, he leaves the both of them. The next day, Ben is seen floating on the pool as the others sunbathe beside it. They all chat peacefully as Joe throws his friend a bottle, urging him to gulp the contents down. Ben reluctantly drinks the sour thing as Bill rings the doorbell yet again. Joe answers him and listens to boring old Bill talking about his 6-month holiday on some island on planet Earth. Just as Joe's about to close the doors on Bill, Bill warns him to be careful out there. Joe acts indifferently and closes the door. As he walks into his house, the alarm blasts off, jolting Joe's adrenaline glands up. He gets into attack mode, turns off the alarm, and picks up a golf club. Joe walks around his house searching for the assailant as he's attacked by yet another creepy dude with long hair. The scary dude kept saying, little pigs, let me come in." After muttering some other things, he headbutts Joe and sees himself out. Later on, there are cops in Joe's house asking an injured Joe some questions about the occurrence earlier on. They conclude the weirdo was just a homeless who had a very bad sandwich and take their leave. By nightfall, the drunken quad's Uber arrives at Joe's residence. Joe throws up inside the Uber and has his girlfriend and friends apologizing for him. After getting in, the quad turn on the news and listen to a live report telling the world a man named Joe Foster was involved in a very bad criminal case. According to the reporter, Joe Foster was seen on every crime scene. You can only guess who Joe Foster is. We'd rather not spoil it for you. Everyone watches the news in awe as they marvel over how Joe could pull this off. The other thought it was all a stunt to scare them. Reality dawns on them as Joe exclaims. After much pressure from his friends, Joe confesses that it's Fear Inc. doing some voodoo or something. As the other three try to rule out the possibility of Joe being the culprit, the power goes out. The men move out of the house to check the breaker box. While outside, Bill calls Joe to tell him there was something on their property. Bill gets taken out before he could reveal who was on Joe's property. A coke-infused Joe then runs back into the house to tell his people the Fear Inc. games have started. Ben and the women beg Joe to cancel their show. Joe acts like a nutcase and says them to go along with the games. Ben takes the phone instead and dials the company to cancel. After getting off the call, Ben, Lindsay, and Ashley lock all the doors in the house. Joe, on the other hand, leaves one of the doors unlocked and joins the others. They hide in the living only to follow Joe outside later on. They get into the car with Joe on the wheels. Joe then tries to start the car but finds out the ignition wires weren't working as they were disconnected by someone. They then decide to get to the neighbor's house. Unfortunately, two creeps block their way and they run back to Joe's house. Ashley gets left out and Ben urges the others to let him go out to find his wife. Ben's allowed outside as Joe and his wife argue about Joe taking things too lightly. Amidst all the arguing, Joe gets hard down the D really. Lindsay subtly accuses him of being an ass as she agrees with him. Joe and Lindsay get to their wine cellar to get some bottles. Joe injures his hand which Lindsay bandages with her cloth. Then, Lindsay helps her babe break a wine bottle. After arming themselves, Joe and his girlfriend walk through their corridor in search of their assailant. They get outside their house silently as they continue their search. In their backyard, they find an arrow in Ashley's head and thigh. Lindsay freaks out and tries to free Ben's wife as Ashley kept telling them the creep was coming for them. Joe and Lindsay run back into their house with Joe coming face to face with one of the creeps from Fear Inc. Upon telling them to cut it out, Joe gets knocked out. When he comes to, he sees himself in another room with Ben tied to a chair. He walks to check out his friend. Just then, a TV near him turns on. The creep on the other end explains to Joe the entire situation. Joe still takes things lightly. After being shown his girlfriend, the creep tells Joe that he must hurt his friend tied to the chair or his girlfriend would be taken out. Joe rushes to action when he finds out that the weapons are real. He keeps telling himself it's just a game as he saws through Ben's hand. Still thinking it's a joke, Joe gets down to finding the key to Lindsay's freedom. He picks up a pair of scissors and cuts open Ben's stomach to find the key. Upon realizing it was all real, it's already too late. His best friend, Ben, was already gone. Joe despairs over what he'd just done as funny music plays with the lights going out. When the lights turn back on, Joe finds the key to his freedom on Ben's chair with Ben no longer there. Joe opens the door and gets to his girlfriend. He then picks up the phone and calls 911. After explaining his woes to the emergency service, a creep comes from behind and attacks him with the phone still on. Thankfully, Joe was high enough not to feel pain as he wrestles the creep to the ground, taking him out in the process. After ending things with the creep, he picks up the phone and finds out his girlfriend was already awake. Upon realizing that Joe had already taken out one of the guys from Fear Inc., Lindsay yells at him to hang up the call. She then rushes to put their home lights back on and tells Joe that he didn't take out anyone and that it was all a game along. Joe was right after all. At that moment, Ben and Ashley walk back into the house to tell Joe it was all a joke. Then, they find out Joe has already taken out one of the actors. Ben and Ashley immediately get out of Joe's house, leaving him and Lindsay to deal with their problem. After explaining things further to Joe, he decides to turn himself in. Lindsay, on the other hand, convinces Joe to dispose of the body. Up next, Joe and his girlfriend, Lindsay, is seen taking the body of the actor out and into the actor's abandoned van. On their way, Lindsay finds out that Fear Inc. had researched all of them for weeks as they drive through the streets. As they get to an intersection, they meet some drunk teenagers they originally thought were Fear Inc. They continue their drive as they pass the speed limit. Later on, there's a cop on their butt cheeks as they're forced to pull over. The cop comes over and asks for their license and registration. The duo fumbles as the cop linger around their van longer than he should. The cop gets back to his car to get something as Joe and Lindsay argue with each other. Something weird happens when the cop comes in and calls Joe to come down from his vehicle. Joe argues that he never told the cop his name. The cop, however, tries to pull them out of the vehicle but gets run over by some dudes. Joe and Lindsay quickly bail as they get to a secluded area in the woods. They dig the grave and get down to hiding their assailant's body. However, as they're about to do so, a group arrives to fish them out. Joe and Lindsay rush to hide as the leader of the gang cajoles them into coming out of their hiding place. Joe and Lindsay get dragged out eventually and beaten up by the leader for eliminating his friend. They then tie him and Lindsay up as they cart the both of them into the jeep they brought. Joe wakes up in the sand crying like a baby as he finds out Lindsay was nowhere to be found. Joe struggles to get up as he writhes in despair over the thought of him losing his wife. The next scene shows Joe walking in the woods till he gets to a gas station. There, he uses the payphone to call a number from a piece of paper on his hands. Once he finds out the line was dead, he goes over to a diner and knocks on the door. He asks the man who opens if he had a phone he could use. The man says he has a phone but he'd need to hear what happened. After hearing his story, the man allows him in. Joe calls a number and finds out his girlfriend Lindsay was alive and next to him. As he reminisces with his girlfriend, he finds out the entire thing was staged. Apparently, Lindsay was on a quest to stop her lover from his horror movie obsession. From what we see, it worked. After settling down from the surprise, Joe has drinks with his people and discusses the events of that evening with all of them. Just then, the leader comes in to have a toast. He compliments everyone for their work as the four quads chill out in the diner. After the toast, Ben, Lindsay, Ashley, and Joe all get killed as the leader of Fear Inc. decides it'll be the best ending to their own horror movie. Up next, there's an old man with a dog picking a call and telling the boys they had another one. The movie ends as we're left to wonder what tragedy was to befall their impending victim. Thanks for watching, guys.